Gilda, Lisa Napolito. Associate producer, assistant editor, and current with Nina Guzman. Well, thanks for being here.
Oh, thank you. Can I say something first?
Yeah, please do.
So Nina's a graduate school at USC. It's her last year. And before we get into everything, Nina's been with me for like 4 years helping on the film, and I couldn't do it without her.
Yeah, for a documentary like this, assistant editor, I think, comes with some more responsibilities than usual. This is really a remarkable film in so many ways. How did all of this footage and material and everything come into your possession? How did this become your project?
It was a work in progress. I didn't know I didn't even know I was going to make such a feature film. Originally, when I started, I would do all the volunteer film videos for Gilda's Club in New York City, which is a place for people with going through cancer. And I thought that the original rendition of the film was going to be about Gilda's Club and about what members going through cancer, how Gilda inspired them. And Nina, we talked about this earlier, I would just start filming whatever I could and started filming. Then Gilda came involved and I started filming her friends, and I didn't really know what the film was. So I kind of edited, shot, and about halfway through the film, Gilda's brother gave me access to some of her personal archives that were in storage since she passed away. And in there were the video that she did of her 9th chemotherapy. And when I saw, it's a film she made herself, a 20-minute film, and there's a little piece of it. And when I saw Gilda in her hospital gown, I was like, oh my God. And I watched it, and I said, it just was a total different thing. And then there were audio tapes, most of them extremely damaged, that Nina helped me. We transcribed them all, and then started collecting more home movies, and then Gilda's brother finally gave me access to her diaries, which were another layer of everything we had.
And all the title cards and stuff yourself, that's all stuff that had been held, and then you guys sort of repurposed it in here.
Yeah, so the title cards, I was pretty adamant that everything would be organic.
Yeah.
And so we had an artist clean up Gilda's writing. So in some places where you couldn't read things, she would take letters from other words and letters from other parts of her diary and kind of put it all together.
And all of her voiceover that was in there, that was stuff that she just recorded to herself? It was from the original project, or where?
It's probably made up of a dozen different sources. So part of it were these amazing 32 hours of audio tapes of Gilda telling her life story, which she meant for, she recorded it for her book, It's Always Something, but the damage on them was extreme.
Wow.
And different tapes had different forms of damage, and some of them had clear, totally clear audio. So some of that is in the film. There's some from her audiobook. There's several radio interviews. We also we would find articles that Gilda wrote where people interviewed her during Saturday Night Live, and we would contact the journalist and say, hey, do you still have the tape from 40 years ago? And we actually did wind up getting some tapes.
Wow.
So some of that audio is from that. So it's a mismatch of all kinds of different, and then some licensed NBC, ABC, CBS.
Yeah, I imagine the licensing of a lot of this was a bit of a nightmare. Did you both tag team that process of it, or?
Well, we had other people. At some point when at one point when there was a rough assembly and everything was shot, CNN Films came on board, and they gave us the funds to be able to finish the film. So we had, at one point, 2 assistant editors, 2 editors, a supervising editor, animator, a photo retoucher. Like, we had a whole team of people come in.
Now, as one of those assistant editors, but also someone who was involved from the beginning, were you at least one of the people kind of filtering through all of this information as it came in?
I knew all of what we had more than anyone else that was working on it. I knew all the pictures. I knew all of her sketches. I cataloged them.
Oh, yeah,
all.
that I forgot.
That was a big job. I watched the first 5 seasons of SNL and took out every single sketch that she was
I think
in.
that's the first time someone has binge watched SNL.
Yeah. I know all the sketches, and so I kind of helped. I helped with the legal log when it came to that point, and like listing everything that we had. And then they were like, "Do we have something like this?" And then I was like, "Oh, it's this tape," you know.
So the organization must be a strong suit to begin with, then, if you're tracking all of that.
Yeah.
Did you have any personal sort of, maybe not, any kind of fanship toward Gilda before you started this? But if not, like, just
I had
about
no
that
idea
process.
who she was.
Yeah.
I was a junior at Marquette University in Milwaukee,
Mhm.
and I was looking for a summer internship, and one of my teachers at the time, she was like, "Oh, I'll post online and see if anyone needs anything." And then Lisa sent me an email.
Wow.
It's she posted on the D Word, which everyone at USC should know about.
D Word, I don't know.
It's like a documentary website. You know more about it.
It's D-word. Oh,
Mhm.
D-word. So it's like a support group for documentary makers, and you could, there's different categories like legal and research and looking for work or
Yeah.
so it's a great resource.
It's an excellent resource. So, what emotion was that like to go through someone's life like that in a documentary and for both of you? Because I assume you had more of a personal fan, and both having worked in the organization and having watched her material.
Well, it was everybody who came onto the project started to, Gilda just became a part of your life. And there's different things that you feel that going through her tapes, you feel that she's talking to you. So like in her tapes, she was saying, well, I better organize my photos because if something happens to me, who's going to organize all my photos? And I was like, okay, that was me.
and then mine was on the really sad tape. I was crying transcribing it. The one where she's talking about her cancer's back, and she feels like a fighter getting knocked down to the floor. She's crying, and then the tape stops, and it starts again. And she's like, to whoever is transcribing this, I'm sorry, I'm so emotional right now. It's just a real emotional time. And I like got goosebumps immediately.
That's
So
amazing.
she touches you.
Yeah. And it's amazing that she also, there's that sense of, I don't know, it's not even the foresight of someone's going to be going through this, but just to think of the individual going through this. I think it's a very revealing aspect of her character and what ends up in the story, too. You also weave a lot in it with issues of mental health, obviously physical health, but I think you captured the surrounding second wave feminism happening during the rise of SNL really well. Was that something that just organically came out of her stuff? Was that a conscious decision by you, or?
Well, the diaries were a total different layer of Gilda. So to me, they were her inner voice, and some of the things in the diary, none of her friends told me about. I didn't know only 2 of her friends knew that she went into the hospital for her eating disorder. And it was because I found the journal and some of these other things that I realized, wow. And her sense of loneliness came from the journals too. And if you asked anybody her friends, was Gilda ever lonely? No, she was never lonely. So to me, it was a voice of what was going on inside her head when she's happy on television and the world is smiling at her. Underneath it all, this stuff is going on.
I think we see a lot of that too in comedy too, where there's a very big gap between sort of the outward facade and the inward struggle. I should have asked probably before the interviews. Did that come before the diary, or was that after? The interviews with the other, all your interview subjects you have.
The last interviews, the last interviews were the modern day comedians.
And Chevy.
And Chevy. Oh yeah, Chevy. Because everybody was like, you need more people from Saturday Night Live in the film. And in some sense, I know the audience loves that, but I tried to keep it as lean as possible. So the modern day comedians read from something called the Fame Journal, where Gilda writes about all her issues about fame in a funny way.
Yeah.
So that was another layer that I felt that somebody else could read. I didn't want anyone to read her real personal stuff, but I wanted them to be able to read her funny stuff.
How did you grapple with that as both a filmmaker and probably someone who, just being invested in this, has a certain investment in protecting her as an individual? How do you grapple with almost the ethics of exposure in a documentary like this?
Well, I felt like I had a responsibility to the family, but I also had a responsibility to really tell Gilda's story in the way that was truthfully. So I think I created who I think Gilda was. I never met her, so that's who I think I created. We had some issues in the edit. We had one editor that, poor Nina comes to New York as assistant editor, and then we fire the editor like 2 days later. And that was because he had a different vision of it. He felt that in the journals, like it was more of an exploitation for the sense of drama. And that was something
Exploiting her struggle, you mean? Or?
Well, creating drama that wasn't there.
Gotcha.
For the sense of, like, oh, this would be a better story. But that's not true. Because you can take something out of context.
Yeah.
Like, in one of Gilda's journals, Gilda really, as far as I know, didn't do any drugs. Her friend said she did. Maybe she smoked pot sometimes or dabbled something, but she did not do drugs. So there was one line, she had a party at her house, and there's something like, I woke up and there was Coke on my mantle. And there's no correlation that that's her cocaine. But it was taken out, you could say, oh, I woke up and there was Coke on my, you could take it out of context. So, yeah, it was, it was a struggle. My editor was really good. We had other people who would be like, this would be more dramatic, but I felt like the drama was in there. I didn't think we had to create it.
Yeah, I do think it really unfolds kind of on its own. Did you allow the whole editing team to see all of the material? So it's sort of the intimate, the direct crew was all sort of in on all of the secrets.
It was a lot of material.
Yeah, it was a lot of material. So Anne, our editor, was pretty amazing also because she was super organized. And it felt really annoying to me at the beginning because she spent weeks organizing things.
Yeah.
But once she got it to how she wanted it, it was so easy for her to go back and find whatever we needed.
You're talking about the organization of just the materials and everything?
Pictures, tapes, audio interviews, television interviews,
Performances.
Yeah.
I mean, everything was categorized.
home movies.
Home movies. And so it was a lot of work.
Can both of you kind of get in a little more into the kind of the nitty-gritty of the narrative editing process of this? Because obviously a lot went into it organizationally, but just talk to me a little bit more about that process and the different sort of, paint a picture of that editing room, if you will.
Well, I'll just tell from my point of view, my background was I was an actress for many years, so I really felt Gilda was a character. and I wanted to kind of get inside her skin and be authentic to her story and her reasoning. So that was kind of from the narrative point of view, I really wanted Gilda to carry her story in an authentic way, or in a dramatic way, because obviously you're creating a story, so you want like conflict and you want resolutions, and you're building towards these things. So that was from my point of view. I kind of went, and that was always my thing with the editors. Well, no, sometimes there's no reason why people do something. It's an emotional, so I always came from the emotional point of view.
Yeah. Was there anything?
Well, it was interesting because for a while we were trying to figure out how to tell the story chronologically.
Oh yeah, that's true.
And we wanted to open with like showing who she was and getting people to really fall in love with her, and establishing that she was a big star, because something that we struggled with was reaching a younger generation. And that's where I came in.
Right.
So I handpicked almost all of those sketches, and I picked the ones that I thought were funniest and went them along. And
Well, it still feels very, I don't know, current in a lot of ways. There's something like, I think you really sort of brought it to the present moment. And I actually think your impulse to stick with the emotional side of it is the reason, because that instinct to try to create an arc of her life in a certain way, I can see why that would be detrimental. Was that, were there any conflicting impulses there? Like, we need to have a more steady kind of narrative arc to this? Because it does feel like it sort of just unfolds on its own. It's not...
we had trouble figuring out how to use the tapes at first.
Yeah. And
the audio tapes?
Yeah, the first cut of the film, because we were using the really damaged tapes, even though we really sent the audio out to the best places that we had heard of throughout the world. And
there was some great stuff that we couldn't.
Yeah, that was but the first rendition of the film had subtitles. And my filmmaker friends were all like, oh, it's great, it's Gilda telling her story, it's fine. And then I would show it to my non-filmmaker friends, and they would be like, I can't hear, I can't look at this picture, and I can't read it, and I'm losing track. So it was really that kind of, so I'm not sure what the question was, but that was, that was sort of the first, so in terms of telling, the main thing for me is that Gilda was going to tell her story.
Yeah.
And also in the editing process, we wanted so much more. We searched for home movies. We searched for every place we knew that Gilda was, we would try to contact.
I sent so many Facebook messages to random people she would pull out of nowhere.
I'd be like, Gilda was in New Orleans in 1976, and this, this strange stuff. But
wow. Well, we have so many people here. I want to let some of you guys ask some questions as well. Yeah, start here.
First of all, I enjoyed the movie.
Thank you.
Very much, thank you. And the other thing is, you portrayed Gilda from the way you think you caught her. Did you get anybody close to her, like Gene Wilder or her two girlfriends, Judy and whatever? Did they corroborate that you did catch the real one that she was?
Yeah, that was one of the best things about the film. Even last night we showed it, and Gilda's typist Bonnie was at the screening. Bonnie was like, "Oh my God," she was great. Her brother is the biggest supporter of the film, and he's really happy. So everyone feels that we really captured her, the way they remembered her. And what's very interesting is that, when you know somebody, you only know them from their point of view, or you only know them from the period of time you know them. Like even Gilda's brother, who was so close to her, he didn't live in New York when she was in Saturday Night Live. He didn't know her life in LA. So her friends are even learning more about her. Yeah. In a good side, in some ways it's heartbreaking because some people really were good friends with her during the SNL days, and they didn't know she was going through. But everyone everyone seems pretty happy. We haven't, everyone's like, and they've seen it a couple times too, so that's a good thing.
Yes, it is.
Was her family involved at all through the editing process in terms of like limiting where you went with certain things or trying to control the outcome?
No, we were very lucky, and I could just call up anybody. I could call Gilda's best friends. I could call Michael. I could call so many of her friends and say, "What was Gilda? Is this true?" So I had I had them as a feedback to make sure things were correct.
And it sounds like you also built up a personal relationship with them in a way that they entrusted you with the story. I mean, it was your work that led to the diaries kind of being revealed. Let's get some more. And you in the middle, please.
You talked about this as starting as looking at Gilda's Club, and I'm curious, you talked a little bit how it then got to be all of Gilda, but if you can talk a bit more about the Gilda's Club aspect of it and what drew you to that.
Well, I do the fundraising videos for Gilda's Club for the last maybe 8 years. In fact, I just shot something a couple weeks ago, and I'm editing another fundraising video for them. So I just love the work that they do. And you walk into the Gilda's Club in New York City, which is on Houston Street, and some filmmakers will know it as the same block as the Film Forum. And there's just images of Gilda around, and it's such a positive place. And the members are I'm just so inspired by people who are so open and honest with what is going on in their life. And I would say 1 in 3 people that I interview will bring up Gilda. And they're very connected to her story, and their journey is her journey. What it's like to be diagnosed, and the journey that you're on. So that was just something I just loved Gilda's Club. So in the end, the film isn't at all about Gilda's Club, but it's bringing awareness to Gilda's Club, and all the screenings that we're doing when the film opens on the 21st. Every screening that is in a city that has a Gilda's Club has a special screening for Gilda's Club. So there's a different, even though it's not about Gilda's Club, there's something good that's happening.
And will that be true for the cancer support community?
Yes, and we're having our premiere on the 13th, and the cancer support community, to kind of backtrack, Gilda went to a place which is in the film called the Wellness Community, which is in Santa Monica, and now it's called the Benjamin Center in Santa Monica. So they'll be attending, and they have 30 seats for the screenings, and the cancer support communities are also doing screenings too.
Yeah.
I really love the film. It's great, and I also am really impressed by all the archival footage you found, and to hear about your editor doing all the work of organizing that. I was wondering if you guys had any plan to kind of preserve that work that you already did to build this film. I know NBC has a photo department or a library or of some kind. If you can take that work you've done and kind of preserve it in a way, if there's a plan you have for that.
Yeah, I've been talking to Michael, Phil's brother, about what we're going to do with her archives. And what we would really love is not for them to be in an institution where they're just put into the archives. We would like to have maybe an exhibit, or have, the film is just finished, so we're still starting to think about it. But in fantasy world, there would be a Gilda Radner house or museum, or
The Museum of Comedy.
The Museum of Comedy we're talking about too, which would be great.
Well, I'm sure the dean would love to talk to you about bringing them here. Yeah, who else has one? Let's get you first. Yeah.
What are the plans for distribution? Did I miss that?
Oh no, this is the best thing. So on September 21st, the film is opening in 51 theaters. And then it'll be on demand somewhat after that. And then it'll be on CNN in 2019.
Okay.
So be sure to tell people about it.
But send your friends to the theater, because it's still better to see a movie in the theater.
Yeah.
It was very nice the way you had current comedians reflecting back on her contributions, and I wonder how you selected or found those particular people.
Well, it was always, I thought, important. To me, I think the film from the beginning has always been about legacy and balancing Gilda's legacy in the world of cancer, and then being this comedian who inspired. Like, if you go online, you can get inspired by Gilda Radner. You have a list of so many people. So it was basically, we had our wish list of the top people, and we got most of them.
There was another, yeah.
So how did you get the initial funding before it was picked up by CNN? I guess before you even got the diary, how did you get that funding?
Well, the first funding came from Indiegogo. So I did a campaign and I raised $55,000. But that was 3 months of really hard work. It was not a enjoyable thing. But what was great about that is I saw that people really love Gilda. And many people donated. I mean, lots of people only donated $1 or $5, but it built this whole, I think about 600 people donated to 600 or 700 people. So it started building that. I did comedy shows, I did a bingo party, I sold t-shirts, and then I had donations and support from the family. From Gilda's brother, particularly, was a financial supporter of the film, and Gilda's friends, and her friends' friends, and my friends, and so that was sort of the money that led to before CNN, but the CNN money was the big money.
I still find that so impressive that he was involved as a donor and a supporter of this, and allowed you sort of the room and the creative freedom to build this. I think it's such a generous thing on the family's part.
Well, you have to meet him. If you met him,
He's
you would
just
know.
as funny as Gilda.
Yeah. He goes to the movie every day, and he sends me a review. So today's review, I won't say what the movie was the best part of the film was the last 20 minutes because I knew it was going to end.
Love that. Yeah, please.
Just out of curiosity, was there anybody that you really wanted to appear in the film but you couldn't get for some reason?
Well, who do you think that would be?
I mean,
Who's the obvious person? Anybody in the audience? Well, no, Gene.
Bill Murray.
Well, Gene was very ill. So I did spend a day with Gene Wilder before he died, and it was a wonderful day. And he was a wonderful person, but he had Alzheimer's, and he was really not in. So yeah, I would have loved Gene, but that wasn't. But the other person we really wanted was Bill Murray, because and we really tried, and it's so funny. The weirdest thing happened on the way here, because I would talk to Gilda's friends, and I talked to a friend of hers named Layla, and who said, "You'll never get Bill." And then I look in the letters out here, and there's a letter from Hunter. She was friends or close to Hunter Thompson, and there's a letter to Layla, and that's the Layla that told me I would never get Bill Murray, which is
in our exhibit out there.
Yeah, it was in the exhibit out there.
Yeah, she produced the movie.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, isn't that a weird? But so even people who are close to Bill said to me he'll never do it. And then there's a documentary about Bill Murray that I saw in Hot Docs that's coming out, how he just appears wherever he wants to appear. So I think that's kind of who he is. He's not going to be somebody who's going to sit down for a documentary and talk about his relationship with Gilda. I don't know. Who knows? I mean, maybe he's in the audience. I don't know.
He's actually running projections. Who else has some questions? Yeah.
So what was the most challenging aspect?
Well, money, definitely. What?
Most challenging aspect. of making the film? Sorry.
So this is my first feature film. Even though I've done, for 20 years, I've directed and produced branded content and theater, and raising money was something that I didn't know was going to be, and I didn't know the film was going to cost. I didn't know what things cost. I didn't know. So that was a learning. I'll never, what I've learned, I'll never go through again. And then the second was the audio tapes. Just trying to salvage some of these amazing stories and salvage those tapes and try to tell, because there were times and there were people saying, you'll never be able to tell this story that way. So those were the two biggest. But there were probably a lot more. There are a lot more.
Do you plan to continue this documentarian path, or was this kind of a one-off for you?
I don't know, I really loved making this film.
Yeah.
And I loved finding, getting inside a character, and I loved the research and the discovery of being a detective.
Yeah.
So I'm playing around with a couple different ideas, and to me, the most important thing is to be able to get unique access to archival materials. So that's kind of, there's a couple different things that I'm pursuing right now. But so far, nothing's been a Gilda, so that's I have to get over that.
Well,
Because
that's
Gilda's a Gilda.
Yeah. I mean, Nina, what do you do after this? You
Nina's graduating in May.
Yeah.
In May. So anybody out there?
Intense.
She's really creative, a hard worker. She made a great short film. So yeah. So I don't know. Sorry to jump in.
Yeah.
And hopefully I'll have a new project.
Yeah. I really want to go into comedy now that I didn't before I started this, but Gilda really inspired me. So I don't know, I kind of want to apply to SNL or something. not as like an actor.
Well, you have a great pitch to them.
Yeah.
All right, how about one last one to wrap us up? In the middle there, yeah.
Hi, well, I guess my question piggybacks on what you were just saying. So for those of us who were fortunate enough to kind of grow up with Gilda, this is sort of a no-brainer. It's like, oh my God, I get to be in the room with this person who inspired so many of us. I mean, I had a friend who was back here, I could hear her like saying the lines to some of the sketches. But I know you're talking about making this movie relevant for a younger audience. So for someone who didn't know her before this, what would you want me to say to my colleagues, other students in my department about why should they see this film from your point of view?
That's a tough question. I've never really watched a documentary where I got to know someone. So going in, I wasn't interested in documentary. And my mom told me, it's Gilda Radner, you have to take it. So I did, and through everything, through learning the tapes and just hearing her talk and watching her on screen, you really get the idea of what kind of person she is. So it feels like I know her. So I guess tell them that they should watch this movie so that they can see. I hope that everyone here saw a piece of Gilda, saw what, like Martin Short talked about in his interview about how all of the girls wanted to be friends with her and all the guys were in love with her. And I fell in love with her. Yeah. I don't know, that's a tough question.
Do you have, even though you had a viewing of her prior to this film, do you have an answer to that question as well, for why you think the story resonates beyond her fan groups, if you will?
Well, I hope it resonates. So some of the screenings that we've had younger people in it who haven't known Gilda, and I'm sure there's people, I guess it's a question more for people in the audience. Did you know who Gilda was?
I mean, I knew who she was, but I think it was like you. I was familiar with her, but I really didn't know her work. I recognized a few characters.
I think, I mean, if we're going gender-wise, I mean, as a woman in history, she really has a place in comedy. And she really felt, in her time, she felt fearless and she felt equal to all the people she performed with, and they all felt the same about her. So I think that in terms of younger audiences, she has a place in history, that especially in entertainment history, I think is important. And also, I don't know, the way she lived her life was, I mean, it's so inspiring to me. I'm hoping her story reaches people who are not just remembering who she is, but like looking at her and saying, wow, this is a great way to face some of your challenges in life.
I also think, coming from your perspective and to answer that question, I do think that for filmmakers here, this is a great portrait of how to capture an individual and a sort of human story and all the complications of it without an agenda as a filmmaker. I think you really have done her memory justice and her story justice by being really genuine to the impact she had on you and had on everyone. So I think that is an important pitch for any filmmaker you're trying to get to see this. I think you're like having the last word. It's the main thing. Well, thank you guys. Please tell people about this film. And
At the New Art in West LA, and then in Pasadena too.
thank you.